What if the secret to supporting healthy aging is not found in a pill, but in the sharp flavors most people avoid? Most of us are trained to avoid bitter taste. We want our food sweet, mild, or comforting. Bitter is often seen as unpleasant, something to skip, or something we only tolerate if we think it is healthy. But emerging research is starting to point at something surprising. Certain bitter compounds in foods appear to interact with a natural process in the body that helps clean out old, damaged cells. This process is called autophagy, and it's often described as a kind of biological spring cleaning for your cells. Today, we're going to explore several bitter foods that researchers believe may help support this natural cellular cleanup process, and what that could mean for seniors looking to feel better as they age. A quick note before we start: autophagy research in humans is still developing. Much of what we know comes from lab and animal studies, with human research still catching up. So think of this video less as a list of guaranteed fixes and more as a tour of foods with promising research behind them, foods that are also just good for you in well-established ways, like supporting digestion, blood sugar, and liver health. This is not about becoming a bitter food expert. It's not about eating strange foods or forcing yourself to suffer through flavors you hate. It's about understanding how a small shift in your diet toward a few specific bitter foods might help your body work a little better as you age. And the best part is that most of these foods are already available in regular markets. You don't need expensive supplements or exotic products. You just need to learn how to use them in a simple, practical way. Let's begin by understanding what autophagy is, why it matters for aging, and before that, why humans are wired to avoid bitter taste in the first place. Before we get into the foods themselves, it helps to understand why bitterness feels so unpleasant to so many of us. This isn't a flaw, it's actually a very old survival mechanism. For most of human history, the ability to detect bitterness quickly was a matter of life and death. Many of the most dangerous plants on Earth, the ones containing toxins, poisons, or compounds that could make you seriously ill, also happen to taste intensely bitter. Our taste buds evolved to flag that bitterness as a warning sign, almost like an internal alarm system. Careful, this might not be safe. That instinct served our ancestors well. But it also meant that many mildly bitter plants, ones that were actually beneficial in small amounts, got grouped in with the dangerous ones, at least in terms of how they tasted to us. Over thousands of years, as agriculture developed and food became more abundant, humans began selectively breeding crops to be sweeter and less bitter. This made food more pleasant and more appealing, but it also gradually reduced our exposure to a category of plant compounds that, in moderate amounts, may offer real benefits. So when you taste something bitter today, your brain is responding with millions of years of inherited caution. That's why bitterness can feel so much more intense than sweetness, even in small quantities. It's not that something is wrong with you, it's that your taste buds are doing exactly what they were designed to do. The good news is that taste preferences are not fixed. Research suggests that repeated, gradual exposure to bitter flavors can shift how intensely we perceive them over time. This is part of why we'll talk later about easing into bitter foods slowly, rather than diving in all at once. With that context in mind, let's look at what autophagy actually is. Autophagy is a word that sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is simple. It roughly means self-eating, or self-cleaning. Your body has a natural way of clearing out old, damaged proteins and cellular debris. Think of it like spring cleaning in your home. Over time, clutter builds up. Without cleaning, the house becomes harder to live in. Something similar happens inside your cells. As we age, our cells gradually accumulate molecular waste, damaged proteins, worn out cellular parts, and other debris. This buildup can affect how efficiently your cells function. Many researchers believe it plays a role in the general sense of slowing down that people often notice as they get older, reduced energy, slower recovery, and so on. Autophagy is the body's built-in way of addressing that waste. During autophagy, cells identify damaged components, break them down, and recycle the materials into new, usable parts. This is a repair and recycling system every human has. Here's the part that matters for this conversation. Research indicates that autophagy activity tends to decline with age. Studies suggest that after roughly age 60, this self-cleaning process becomes less active in many people. Cells may not clear waste as efficiently as they once did, which some researchers believe contributes to fatigue, slower recovery, and reduced resilience that many older adults notice. So the natural question is, can we help support this system? Early research suggests we might be able to, at least in part. And one of the more interesting areas of study involves something surprisingly simple: bitter taste. Some research suggests that certain bitter compounds may act as signals that influence cellular cleanup processes, including autophagy-related pathways. The idea is that these compounds may help nudge dormant repair systems into action. To be clear, this isn't about forcing your body into some unnatural state. It's about exploring foods that, through both traditional use and modern research, appear to support processes your body is already designed to carry out. For most of human history, bitter taste wasn't something to avoid, it was something to respect. Many traditional diets around the world included bitter plants specifically because they were believed to support digestion, liver function, and overall vitality. Bitterness was often seen as a signal that a plant contained potent, biologically active compounds. Today, our food environment looks very different. Much of what we eat is sweeter, softer, and less complex than what previous generations ate. Sugar, salt, and fat are added to make food more appealing, and many naturally bitter foods have quietly disappeared from regular meals. For seniors, this shift may matter more than it does for younger people. As we age, digestion can slow down, energy levels can fluctuate, and the body's natural repair systems, including autophagy, tend to become less active. Including foods that support these processes is one small way to work with your body rather than against it. Research on various bitter compounds points to several areas where they may offer supports: liver function and detoxification pathways, digestive processes including bile production, blood sugar regulation, activation of certain cellular repair pathways, and reduction of oxidative stress. Each of these areas tends to become more important, not less, as we get older. Now let's get into the foods themselves. The first group of bitter foods we'll explore is cruciferous vegetables, especially arugula and broccoli rabe. These vegetables belong to the same family as broccoli, kale, and cabbage. They're known for their distinctive bitterness, their peppery flavor, and a long history of use in traditional Mediterranean cooking. Arugula, sometimes called rocket lettuce, has a sharp, slightly spicy, bitter taste. It's most often used raw in salads, though it can also be lightly cooked. Broccoli rabe, also called rapini, is more intensely bitter, with long, thin stalks, leafy greens, and small broccoli-like florets. Both of these vegetables contain compounds called glucosinolates, which research suggests may help activate something called the NRF2 pathway. NRF2 is often described as one of the body's key cellular defense systems. When activated, it's associated with increased production of antioxidant enzymes, which may help the body manage toxins and reduce oxidative stress. For seniors, supporting liver health is particularly valuable. The liver plays a central role in filtering toxins, processing nutrients, and managing energy throughout the body. When the liver is functioning well, people often report feeling more clear-headed and energetic. When liver function is sluggish, fatigue and a general sense of heaviness can follow. One quick preparation tip: try not to overcook these vegetables. Some of the beneficial compounds in arugula and broccoli rabe, including certain enzymes and glucosinolates, appear to be sensitive to heat. Lightly sautéing for just a few minutes, gentle steaming, or eating them raw in salads may help preserve more of these compounds. A simple way to enjoy arugula is tossed in a salad with olive oil, lemon juice, and a pinch of salt. For broccoli rabe, try a light sauté with garlic and olive oil, then mix it into pasta, rice, or alongside roasted vegetables. The second group of bitter foods is dandelion and chicory, plants many people see growing in gardens or fields but rarely think to eat. Dandelion greens are dark, bitter, and slightly spicy. They can be eaten raw in salads or lightly cooked as a vegetable. Dandelion root can be dried and brewed as a tea or used as a coffee substitute. Chicory is similar, bitter leaves, and a root that's often roasted and blended into coffee. Both dandelion and chicory are notable for their prebiotic fiber content. Prebiotics are a type of fiber that feed beneficial bacteria in your gut. A healthy gut microbiome is increasingly linked in research to immune function, nutrient absorption, and even mood regulation. For seniors, gut health deserves special attention. As we age, digestion often slows, and the balance of gut bacteria can shift in ways that may affect overall health. Including prebiotic-rich foods like dandelion and chicory is one practical way to support a healthier gut environment. Chicory also contains a compound called chicory acid, which some studies suggest may help support insulin sensitivity. This connects to a broader theme we'll come back to. Blood sugar stability appears to play a role in how readily the body can engage in repair-oriented processes like autophagy. When blood sugar is frequently spiking and crashing, the body tends to stay in storage and use mode rather than repair and recycle mode. Dandelion greens can be lightly sautéed with garlic and olive oil or tossed into salads with a squeeze of lemon. Dandelion root makes a mild, earthy tea. Chicory leaves work well in salads or as a cooked side dish, and chicory root can be added to coffee for a subtle, slightly bitter flavor. The third group is dark cacao and green tea, not vegetables, but still rich sources of bitter plant compounds that have been studied for their effects on cellular health. Dark cacao is the less processed form of cocoa, and it's notably more bitter than typical chocolate. It's high in polyphenols, a broad category of antioxidant compounds that research suggests may help protect cells from oxidative stress, which is damage caused by unstable molecules called free radicals. Green tea is another bitter beverage rich in polyphenols, particularly one called EGCG. EGG has been studied for its potential role in reducing inflammation and supporting mitochondrial health. Mitochondria are often called the energy factories of your cells. When they're functioning well, you tend to have more steady energy. When they're under stress, fatigue can follow. For seniors, supporting mitochondrial health is especially relevant, since energy levels naturally tend to decline with age. Foods like cacao and green tea won't reverse that process, but research suggests they may help support the underlying cellular machinery involved. Some preliminary research has also explored connections between certain bitter polyphenols and a class of proteins called sirtuins, which are involved in cellular maintenance and stress resistance. This research is still developing, and most of it has been done in cell or animal models, but it's in its active area of interest. The key here is moderation, not maximizing. You don't need large amounts of cacao or green tea, just a consistent, modest amount over time. A simple way to include dark cacao is a small piece of high-quality chocolate with at least 70% cacao, or a spoonful of cacao powder stirred into oatmeal, yogurt, or a smoothie. For green tea, 1 to 2 cups a day is a reasonable starting point. Choose a good quality tea, and try to avoid adding too much sugar, since the bitterness is part of what's being studied. The fourth group is bitter melon and citrus bergamot, both of which have been studied primarily for their role in blood sugar regulation. As mentioned earlier, blood sugar stability appears to be closely connected to the body's ability to shift into repair-oriented processes like autophagy. When blood sugar is high and fluctuating, the body tends to prioritize using and storing energy. When blood sugar is more stable, there may be more room, metabolically speaking, for repair processes to occur. Bitter melon is a vegetable, intensely bitter, that has a long history of use in traditional medicine across parts of Asia, Africa, and the Caribbean, often specifically for blood sugar support. Some modern studies have explored compounds in bitter melon that appear to interact with insulin signaling pathways. Citrus bergamot is a citrus fruit, more bitter than a typical orange or lemon, and some research has looked at compounds in bergamot in relation to cholesterol and blood sugar markers, though this research base is smaller and less established than the research on bitter melon. And here's an important part, especially for seniors. If you take medication for diabetes or blood sugar, including metformin, insulin, or other glucose-lowering medications, please talk to your doctor or pharmacist before regularly adding bitter melon to your diet. Because bitter melon may affect blood sugar, combining it with diabetes medication could potentially lower blood sugar more than expected. This is a real interaction worth discussing with a healthcare provider, not just a general disclaimer. It's specifically relevant if you're managing diabetes. For everyone else, bitter melon can be a useful addition in moderation. A simple way to prepare it is sautéed with garlic and olive oil, or added to stir fries with other vegetables to balance the flavor. Citrus bergamot is less commonly available fresh, but bergamot juice or bergamot-flavored tea like Earl Grey can be a gentler way to incorporate it. Here's a bitter food that often gets left off lists like this: sesame seeds, especially in the form of tahini, the bitter sesame paste used in hummus and many Middle Eastern dishes. Sesame seeds, particularly when slightly toasted, have a distinct bitter, nutty flavor. They're rich in compounds called lignans, which are plant compounds that have been studied for their antioxidant properties and their potential role in hormone metabolism. For seniors, sesame and tahini offer a few practical advantages. They're widely available, inexpensive, and easy to incorporate into meals that already feel familiar. Tahini drizzled over roasted vegetables, blended into salad dressings, or used as a dip with vegetables or whole grain crackers. Some research has also looked at sesame lignans in relation to cholesterol levels and markers of oxidative stress, though as with several foods on this list, more human research is still needed to draw firm conclusions. A simple way to use this food is to try a tablespoon of tahini mixed with lemon juice, a little water, and garlic as a quick sauce for vegetables, grains, or chicken. It has a pleasant bitterness that blends well with other flavors, making it an easy entry point for people who are new to bitter foods. There's one more category worth mentioning, and it's one that's probably already sitting in your kitchen cabinet: bitter herbs and spices, particularly turmeric, ginger, and fenugreek. Turmeric is technically more known for its earthy, slightly bitter, peppery flavor than for being intensely bitter, but that bitterness comes from a compound called curcumin, which has been one of the most studied plant compounds of the last 2 decades. Research has explored curcumin's role in reducing markers of inflammation throughout the body, and chronic low-grade inflammation is something many researchers believe accelerates the kind of cellular wear and tear that autophagy is meant to help clean up. In other words, turmeric may not directly switch on cellular cleanup the way some of the other foods we've discussed might, but it may help reduce some of the burden that cellular cleanup needs to deal with in the first place. One practical note about turmeric: curcumin on its own is not absorbed particularly well by the body. Research suggests that combining turmeric with a small amount of black pepper, which contains a compound called piperine and a source of fat like olive oil, can significantly improve how much curcumin your body actually absorbs. So a pinch of black pepper alongside your turmeric isn't just a flavor choice. It may genuinely change how useful that turmeric is. Ginger has a warm, slightly bitter, spicy bite, and it has one of the longest track records of any food on this list when it comes to traditional use for digestion. Long before anyone was talking about autophagy, ginger was being used across many cultures specifically to settle the stomach, ease nausea, and support healthy digestion after meals. Modern research has supported some of these traditional uses, particularly around digestive comfort and reducing inflammation. For seniors, ginger can be an especially gentle entry point into bitter flavors because most people are already familiar with it and tolerate it well. A small piece of fresh ginger steeped in hot water makes a simple tea. Grated ginger can be added to stir-fries, soups, or even oatmeal. Fenugreek is less familiar to many people in Western countries, but it has a long history of use in South Asian and Middle Eastern cooking, and its seeds have a distinctly bitter, slightly maple-like flavor when toasted. Fenugreek has been studied for its potential role in blood sugar regulation, similar to some of the foods we discussed earlier. And some research has looked at its fiber content and how that might support healthy cholesterol levels. Fenugreek seeds can be soaked overnight and added to dishes, or toasted lightly and ground into a powder that can be sprinkled into soups, stews, or vegetable dishes. The flavor is intense, so a small amount goes a long way. This is very much a food where a little goes further than you expect. What ties turmeric, ginger, and fenugreek together is that they're not really foods in the sense of something you'd eat a serving of. They reseasonings, and that makes them in some ways the easiest of everything we've discussed to work into your existing meals. You're probably not going to build a meal around fenugreek, but you might season a soup with it. You're probably not going to eat a plate of turmeric, but a pinch in your scrambled eggs or rice barely changes the dish at all while potentially adding something useful. Before we move into how to actually use these foods day to day, let's address a few common questions and misconceptions. Does this mean you need to fast to get the benefits of autophagy? Fasting is one well-studied way to encourage autophagy, and it's a topic worth discussing with a doctor if you're interested in it, especially for seniors, since fasting isn't appropriate for everyone, particularly those with certain medical conditions or who are underweight. But the foods we're discussing today are a separate, gentler approach. You don't need to fast to potentially benefit from including more bitter foods in your diet. If bitter is good, does that mean more bitter is always better? Not necessarily. More research is generally focused on moderate, regular intake rather than large amounts. Some very bitter substances, including certain herbal extracts and concentrated supplements, can interact with medications or cause digestive discomfort in large doses. Whole foods in normal culinary amounts are generally a safer starting point than concentrated extracts or supplements. If you've always hated bitter foods, does that mean this isn't for you? Not at all. Taste preferences can shift over time with gradual exposure, and there's a wide range of bitterness across these foods. From the mild bitterness of tahini to the intensity of broccoli, rabe, or bitter melon, the goal isn't to force a food you genuinely dislike. It's to find one or two that are tolerable for you and build from there. And is any of this a replacement for medication or medical care? No. Diet can be a meaningful part of supporting overall health, but it isn't a substitute for medical treatment, and none of this should be used to replace medications without talking to your doctor, particularly given the blood sugar interaction we mentioned with bitter melon. There's an interesting historical practice worth mentioning here, because it connects almost everything we've talked about into one simple habit, the tradition of drinking something bitter before a meal. In many European countries, particularly in places like Italy, France, and parts of Germany and Scandinavia, it was once extremely common to drink a small glass of a bitter beverage, often called an aperitivo or digestif, depending on whether it was before or after the meal, specifically to prepare the digestive system for eating. These bitter drinks were typically made from infusions of bitter herbs, roots, and plants, including some of the same families of plants we've discussed today, like chicory and dandelion relatives, along with things like gentian root and wormwood. The idea behind this tradition wasn't just cultural preference. There's a physiological basis for it. When you taste something bitter, it triggers a response in your body that includes increased saliva production and increased production of digestive juices, including stomach acid and bile. Essentially, bitterness acts as a kind of signal that tells your digestive system, food is coming, get ready. For seniors, this is particularly relevant because digestive efficiency, including stomach acid production, tends to decline with age. Many older adults produce less stomach acid than they did when they were younger, which can affect how well nutrients, especially certain vitamins and minerals, are absorbed from food. This doesn't mean you need to start drinking bitter aperitifs before dinner. And if you're on any medications, alcohol-based bitters in particular come with their own set of considerations you'd want to discuss with a doctor. But the underlying principle is worth holding on to. A small amount of bitter taste before a meal may help prime your digestive system in a way that makes the rest of the meal work a little better for you. This is actually one of the simplest ways to use everything we've talked about today. A small arugula salad before your main course, a few sips of a bitter herbal tea like dandelion or chicory root, 15 or 20 minutes before eating. Even a small piece of dark chocolate after a meal, which has traditionally been used in some cultures as a way to signal the meal is complete to the digestive system. None of this requires you to restructure your meals. It's more about thinking of bitterness as something that can bookend a meal. Start perhaps a little at the end, rather than something that has to be the main event. So how do you actually bring these foods into your life? You don't need to eat all 6 of these foods every day. The goal is a gentle, sustainable rotation over time, not a strict new regimen. If you're new to bitter foods, start with just 1. Try it once or twice a week and pay attention to how you feel, your energy, digestion, and overall sense of well-being. If you like it, include it more often. If you don't, try a different one from the list. There's no requirement to love bitterness, only to include small, manageable amounts. For arugula, mix a small handful into a salad with sweeter ingredients like tomatoes, apple slices, or oranges. The sweetness balances the bitterness. For broccoli rabe, saute lightly with garlic and olive oil, then mix into pasta or rice, where the other flavors soften the bitterness considerably. For dandelion greens, steam or saute gently with a little lemon and mix with milder vegetables like carrots. For chicory, add a small amount of chicory root to your coffee. Even a teaspoon adds a subtle depth without overwhelming the flavor. For dark cacao, try a small square of dark chocolate or a spoonful of cacao powder blended into oatmeal or yogurt. For green tea, start with 1 cup a day, and if it tastes too strong, try brewing it for a shorter time. For bitter melon, cook it with sweeter vegetables like carrots and onions to balance the flavor, and keep that medication note in mind if it's relevant to you. And for tahini, a spoonful mixed into salad dressing or used as a dip is one of the gentlest ways to start. Once you've tried a few of these and found 1 or 2 you like, the next step is making them a regular, but not rigid, part of your week. Plan ahead by choosing specific days for specific foods. Arugula in Wednesday's salad, broccoli rabe with Friday's dinner, for example. Keep these foods stocked when you shop so they're available when you want them. Prepare some in advance, like sauteing broccoli rabe ahead of time or brewing a batch of green tea to keep in the fridge. If it helps, a simple note on the calendar or a reminder on your phone can keep things consistent. And if you live with someone or have a caregiver, this can be a nice shared activity, cooking together, trying new combinations, and making it part of a meal you both enjoy rather than a separate task. Many people feel that meaningful health improvements require dramatic changes, a complete diet overhaul, intense exercise programs, or expensive supplements. But research on behavior change consistently points the other way. Small, sustainable adjustments tend to produce better long-term outcomes than dramatic short-term changes. Small changes are easier to maintain, which means they're more likely to still be part of your life 6 months or a year from now. They also tend to build on themselves. Once you've successfully added one bitter food to your week, you may find yourself naturally curious about other small dietary adjustments, like reducing added sugar or increasing vegetable variety. If you do start incorporating some of these foods regularly, here's what some people report noticing over the following weeks and months, though individual experiences vary and these aren't guarantees. Some people report feeling somewhat more energetic, particularly if liver or digestive function was a limiting factor before. Digestion may feel smoother for some, especially with the prebiotic-rich foods like dandelion and chicory. Blood sugar may feel more stable throughout the day for those who incorporate bitter melon or reduce reliance on very sweet foods. And some people simply report feeling good about making a positive, manageable change which has its own value, independent of any specific physiological effect. None of these changes tend to happen overnight. Most people who notice a difference describe it as gradual over weeks rather than days. It's completely fine if bitterness isn't your thing. You're not required to enjoy it. You just need a way to include small amounts that works for you. Mix bitter foods with sweeter or milder ingredients. Cook them lightly to soften the flavor. Add a little olive oil or lemon to round things out. Start with very small amounts and increase gradually only if you want to. And if one food feels too intense, try a milder one. Tahini and chicory in coffee tend to be much gentler starting points than broccoli rabe or bitter melon. Bitter foods are just one piece of a much larger picture when it comes to healthy aging. Sleep, movement, social connection, and overall diet quality all matter, probably more in the bigger picture than any single food group. But if you're looking for one small, low-cost, low-risk change to consider, adding a bit more bitterness to your diet in the form of arugula, broccoli rabe, dandelion, chicory, dark cacao, green tea, tahini, or with your doctor's input if you're on diabetes medication, bitter melon is a reasonable place to start. Start small. Pick one. See how it goes. And remember, if you're on any medications, especially for diabetes, it's always worth a quick conversation with your doctor or pharmacist before making significant dietary changes. Sometimes the flavors we've spent generations learning to avoid are worth a second look.